Beautiful tune. Oh, California. Yeah, off the CD, American Sunshine. That's Colin Hay live in our studios right here at WGWG 88.3 FM in Boiling Springs, North Carolina. And if you're listening online, that's WGWG.org. One of the things about this CD and some of the others of the solo projects that I've heard, Colin, is that, especially the stripped down ones, you really get a sense for the lyrics and you just paint these incredible pictures. And, you know, I go back and when I listen to the Men at Work stuff, you can hear that too, especially when you did the stripped down, you kind of redid your own songs, reimagined your own songs, and you get to really feel that and hear that, hear those deep lyrics. Music's always been in your life. When we talked before, you were saying that you grew up in a very entertainment-oriented family. Your dad owned a record store. Is that right? And they don't have record stores anymore. Kids today don't know about record stores. What's a record store? You know, it's where you used to buy your music before there was iTunes or Walmart. Record stores. What were some of those influences for you when you were around so much because your dad did have a record store?
Well, he had a store that had it had pianos and guitars and drum kits and, you know, violin strings and little bridges for violins and all those little things that you need to get in a music store, you know. So it was like a full service music store, but it was small, you know, and there was like 3 or 4 racks of albums, in which, you know, you always had Elvis Presley, and you always had Jim Reeves.
Yeah.
You always had Johnny Cash, and you always had the Beatles and so forth. But I mean, my influences were like everybody else, like you've got on the wall there. You know, it was like the Beatles and the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and the Who. And then my older brother introduced me to soul music and played things like, you know, Wilson Pickett and Otis Redding and you know, Booker T and the MGs and stuff like that. So he was. I didn't really know about that until he played them for me. But then we went to Australia when I was 14. So my father had a music shop for about 10 years or something before we went there. So that's how I was brought up. So I started playing the guitar when I was about 12, you know, and I've kind of loved the guitar ever since. It's one of those instruments that you know, takes you a few lifetimes to get the hang of, you know. I never really learned any particular style. I was a bit lazy, so I would learn different ways of playing and cheat, you know, and like I would get some jazz lessons and I wouldn't really practice properly, you know, so I would learn a couple of songs and write a couple of songs around them, you know. So sorry, I'm a bit distracted by the
no problem
by the clicking of the cameras.
No problem.
In the radio station, which you can't see.
After you moved to Australia, how long before you started playing and performing live?
Oh, I started when I was about 14. So I started playing in folk clubs. So this is kind of my natural game. So I've started playing in folk clubs when I was about 14, and then, you know, I went to school and university and all that. But I was writing songs all then, but it took about 10 or 15 years for them to get to the point where I thought they were any good, and other people thought they were good as well. I can remember playing in a bar. I think it was like 77, 78, I think, and somebody requested Down Under, so that was a big moment where, you know, we would play covers. It was just the two of us, me and Ron, the other guitar player. So you know, we would play some James Taylor, we'd play John Martin, we would play some Ry Cooder, and we would do different material, and then we would play some originals. And then it was a great moment when somebody requested one of our songs. We thought, oh, that's a nice thing. So anyway, that wasn't answering the question.
It did. And you that was 77, 78, that time frame. Not long after that, I read somewhere, now this may not be true, that you were the highest paid unsigned band in Australia touring the pubs. Is that?
Yeah, apparently, but I don't think it was paid all that much.
Okay.
To frame of reference wasn't. No, we used to have big audiences though, because before we made records, we used to get maybe between, you know, sometimes 600-800 people and something like that, which is a big audience for an unsigned act.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And but when we made the record, when we made business as usual, the thing that made a difference was having the Peter McKeon, the producer, the American producer, he really pulled things into focus, because we were a kind of a hippie jamming band before that, and it was focused but not that focused,
Okay.
So we would, for example, we would play Who Can It Be Now, and the saxophone hook of the song never appeared for 3 minutes into the song, and nobody cared because everyone's drinking, and nobody cared. We would just play this groove, and then all of a sudden 3 minutes later the saxophone would turn up and go ba-da-da-ba-ba-da. And of course, Peter said, why don't you move the saxophone up to the front of the song? Because the radio programmer is not going to listen to the song for 3 minutes. He's going to play it for about 5 seconds, and you got to grab him in that time.
Right.
So we thought, oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
So consequently, it was just dum dum ba ba dum dum
Yeah.
ba. And oh, here we go. So things like that. So it really pulled the songs into focus. So he was very, very important.
And so that was it was released in Australia first. Is that correct?
Well, we actually only got a deal for a single. That's how
Okay.
that's how much confidence the record label had in us. They said do a single first. So we recorded Who Can It Be Now, and it went to number 2. So they said, okay, you can do an album. So the album cost about 30 grand, the first one. We did it in 10 days.
Wow.
We recorded the tracks in 5 days. We did the overdubs in 5 days, and then it took about 10 days to mix it. So it was a very fast record.
Wow.
And we made it in this small studio called Richmond Recorders, which was very, very small. And we kept on noticing a lot of people coming in and out of the studio. And it turns out that they were running drugs out of there,
Okay.
different kind of powders.
Right.
We thought, geez, this is a busy studio, and they would all go upstairs and come back out,
Right.
So that was, and I think that the guys that ran that place got busted, soon after.
But you got
That's a side story.
but you got a recording out of the process.
Yeah, nothing to do with us, but it was we were ready then,
Yeah, and that was in '81 is about the time frame that came out. About the same time frame that MTV.
Well, America
They
was.
do.
I mean, we actually had success in many different territories around the world. Canada, and some European countries, and the United States was the last country to pick up on the band. It was about a few months after everywhere else.
Okay.
And actually, our album got rejected twice by the American label. The American A&R rejected it because they said there was no hits on it.
Wow.
In an extreme example of cultural arrogance, they decided that this record wasn't going to work. And the guy who signed our band was an Australian guy called Peter Carpin. Now he used to work work in New York and worked for a guy called Dick Asher who ran Columbia. And he called him up, but he said, "Listen, this record's going to happen. You have to override the A&R's decision not to release this album because it's going to happen." So he did that. So he forced its release, and then it all started to snowball from there. But it was a struggle to get it released here.
Let me ask you this: what was the impact of that MTV audience once it hit? Because it was new.
The thing is, people seem to. MTV was important, but the thing is with MTV was that it was a really great idea, and we were fortunate because we came in on the first wave of that when they only had about 4 videos to play, so consequently you'd get this heavy rotation. But having said that, it still wouldn't have happened unless the radio was happening.
Right, okay.
Radio was still was the most powerful thing.
Okay.
So because radio was playing it, and it was and the record was jumping,
right,
they started to play the videos.
Yeah. The record 16 weeks at number 1. I think it was finally knocked off the charts by a guy named Michael Jackson in an album called Thriller. So you had a pretty decent run right there at number 1. And that was the U.S. charts.
Yeah.
Going back to where we are now, your shows, when people come to see your shows, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that there's kind of this balance where you'll hear some of the old stuff and yet you'll throw your new stuff in. How do you do that balance between your men at work days and your 10 solo album days?
Well, I just really play. There's about 3 or 4. There's about 3 or 4 men at work songs that I play. As a rule.
Okay.
And that's as somebody said one night when they came to see me, who reviewed my show. He said, "Mr. Hay lightly peppers his show with hits." So I use the hits as a condiment.
Right.
Noel.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
It's not the main meal,
right,
but it's a nice additive.
Yeah.